Hey everybody, welcome to Willow Talk, episode 4. My name is Chris Baker, and with me as always is...
Cameron Suey.
We're two old friends who met while we worked at LucasArts in the mid-2000s and bonded over Willow, but Cameron, you seem a little down.
Yeah.
What's up with that? Does that have anything to do with the special guest that you promised last week?
I don't want to talk about it right now.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
What would you like to talk about? Perhaps the latest episode of Willow?
You know what? That would make me feel a whole lot better. Let's jump right in.
Let's do that. Chapter 4, I almost said episode. The Whispers of Nockmaar. I'm assuming it says Chapter 4, The Whispers of Nockmaar at the beginning, because every other episode has begun with a storybook that clearly says in English, chapter blank. This is not so clear because it is an entirely different book. Not actually a storybook, more of a spell book. We can talk about that later.
Yeah, we can only assume that the language we're seeing at that point is cursed Nakadic.
Exactly. Or if you're talking Star Wars, kind of the equivalent of Orabesh.
Yes. I think this is a super nice touch that I kind of jumped up out of my seat immediately when I saw it because it was so radically different. And actually, I follow one of the writers of the show on Twitter, John Bickerstaff, and he mentioned that was something that very early on that they wanted to do was have a vastly different book opening just for this episode to give it a different feel. And boy, was that successful because it was they had established this lovely opening sequence. There's not a credit sequence to Willow. We go right to those chapter books. And it was sort of striking to see a bound in flesh book covered in evil runes.
Then eventually dripping in blood as well. There's this blood effect just pours over as we see, a nice piece of art of our heroes approaching Nockmaar Castle. To me, I don't know if it's the exact same shot used in the movie, but it kind of evokes that. You get a nice, big, huge look at Nockmaar Castle.
I'm not sure if that shot was the same, but they do so much direct shot matching later that I wouldn't be surprised if they were very, very intentionally doing the shot from the Willow movie.
Yeah, and so we pan into our party. It's raining really hard. Very unpleasant situation. Willow is not happy himself. He says, "Don't you see, this is what she wants. This fortress was the stronghold of the most brutal tyrant of her age, Bavmorda."
Or as Borman says, Kit's grandma.
Which, obviously, we saw the movie, and we know she lives up to that. Basically, pure evil, and we learn more about that evil later in the episode, once we get there.
I was actually really surprised about that. One of the things we talked about with the original movie is that it's lore light in some places. And I was sort of delighted that they dug back deeper instead of developing more of their own forward story at this point. It was, like I said, I'm a tough sell for nostalgia, but I am doing a Willow podcast. So if anything's going to get me, that's that.
Yeah, it's like a lot of, I guess, older fantasies and even stuff like Star Wars. They had one movie and they had what was in that movie, and it was good versus evil. Willow is as good versus evil as it gets. I think it even in the opening, the words at the beginning of the movie call her the evil queen Bavmorda, and she's referred to.
Yes, it's very straightforward about the ethics.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. She never in any way is in any way empathetic.
Her first action on screen is to order the death of multiple babies, which in sort of screenwriting 101 is sort of a kick the dog sort of a thing. You're not supposed to like a person who murders multiple babies within the first 30 seconds of their appearance. Actually,
I think I might have caught a Return of the Jedi reference here that might have been in the first episode. I don't remember if Saoirse actually used these words when she talked to Kit, but she said, "There's more. It won't be easy to hear this, but you must." Do you recognize that?
No, I don't recognize it from Return of the Jedi.
It's when Luke's talking to Leia at the Ewok village.
Okay, so we're going to edit this part out, and I'm going to say, yes, of course I recognize that. I am a Star Wars fan, and I recognize that reference immediately.
Yes, the Force runs strong in my family. I have it. My father has it. My sister has it. That scene right there. Those are the words that Luke uses. So that's the distinct 80s quote in this episode that I caught that may have been in the first episode. I don't recall.
I think it was in the first episode because it is a repeat of what Saoirse says to Kit. Mm-hmm. And I'm deeply allergic to the use of voiceover to remind audiences what has happened in the past. I get hives because I feel like my intelligence and my memory is not being respected.
Okay, fair enough.
This one bothered me a little. Having said that, they use it later, and it worked for me. And it may be one of the only times that flashback VO has worked for me, and I'll explain why.
This VO plays over Kit just kind of looking around as they're entering Nockmaar Castle, and she's seeing all this creepy stuff that is maybe technically hers as an heiress.
I'm not quite sure what the inheritance laws are in Willow World, but yeah, technically.
Did Badmorda have a will? If Badmorda had a will, it could possibly have been gifted to Sorsha, and then Sorsha. I don't think that really matters, though, because no one really wants to be here, and we'll get a taste of that more and more as we go.
Something that didn't strike me until I sat back down and watched the whole thing again was this is a haunted house story. For the entire episode. It is a closed haunted house adventure. And sort of continuing with that, like this story being an RPG party on a quest, it really feels like a one-shot dungeon that the GM has said, I want to do some serious horror movie vibes for a bit.
Yes.
And I really enjoyed that they dove headfirst into that sort of genre right away.
Yeah, there was actually an interview I read on sci-fi.com, I think it was, where the writer of the show was basically saying how much they were really interested in making like a horror movie for this episode.
That's interesting because I also saw a quote from Mr. Kasdan, the showrunner, who said that one of the original things that they sat down at the table read is, if we do anything with the Willow TV show, is that we want to make kids laugh and scare the out of kids. And I think that's a really nice knowing that was their foundational message from the beginning, because that's exactly what Willow did for me as a kid. Made me laugh and gave me deep-seated fears for the rest of my life.
Yes, exactly. We've discussed that in a previous episode. In the show now we're in the throne room, and Willow's just kind of chilling on Badmorda's throne.
Yeah, he really looks casual, like he's just put himself there and he's going to have a nice little sit.
I was trying to think, is there some sort of deeper meaning to this? And I don't, is it him just Badmorda's out of the way, I'm just going to be as disrespectful to her as possible?
I think there's
I think he's just chilling on the throne.
I think there's a little bit of that, but I also think there's a little bit in this entire episode where Willow isn't maybe the most trustworthy person, and it relies on that a little bit later, but everybody sort of is hesitant about the things he wants to do or the conclusions that he comes to, and having him sit in Badmorda's throne makes it feel even more sort of awkward and uncomfortable. Because there's no discussion for why.
Yeah. He's just kind of there. But more importantly, they are chaining up Graydon. Because Graydon, of course, as we saw at the end of the last episode, is now cursed with the curse of the Lich, I guess we can call it.
Touch of the Lich. But they call it possession. And they really play it like a straight-up zombie movie. He has been bit. It is only a certain amount of time before he changes. And they talk about what they need to do with that, and it's that horror movie genre that they just jump right into.
It's zombie, but it's also The Exorcist, essentially. Right?
Absolutely.
They even have an exorcism joke from Poorman a little later on. Speaking of jokes, Elora tries her hand at comedy at some point.
Yes, she makes the joke like a vermithax at a Vestal fair.
Yes,
did you recognize vermithax?
We all know exactly what those are. No, I don't know what that means.
Oh my gosh, Chris, I have recognized an 80s reference that you did not. Vermithax is the name of the dragon in the film Dragon Slayer.
Wow.
Yes.
Okay. Nice.
Yes. Spelled ever so slightly differently, but basically the same thing. Vestal, on the other hand, refers to a Roman goddess. So I'm not sure if that was an intentional connection to Roman mythology, but I was mostly geeking out about vermithax.
So if we take those at face value, it's like a dragon at a Roman holiday festival?
Yeah. Which maybe explains why Boorman didn't think it was a great joke. Now, at this point, also, Boorman makes the first joke that I groaned at, which is that he refers to Graydon as Greyonce. Now, on second viewing, if I'm trying to be apologetic, it's possible that he's double rhyming the word fiancé with Greyonce.
Right.
But I also thought that it was possibly a Beyonce reference.
I think it was both of those. I think it was a Beyonce reference at the meta level and a rhyming reference at the this is what's happening in the world level.
We've talked a little bit about modernity and language, and maybe we should chat a little bit about at the end of the show about modernity overall in the show. This was the first time that a modern joke or modern language grated on me enough that I noticed.
Yes, I actually totally missed it the first time, and I saw the actor's tweet about how happy he was that it made it in there. Because I think he didn't know for sure. It was probably an ad lib, and he was very happy to see that it made it in there. So when I saw it the second time with subtitles, I definitely caught it.
Sir, I am just a humble podcaster, and that is only my opinion. But yeah.
So yes, now we have Graydon kind of describing his situation, and he seems very knowledgeable about it. He says, what happened to Valentine and Merrick is going to happen to me.
Yeah. He also says something extremely bizarre, which is, I've had some experience with this before, and I know I'm not strong enough to stop it.
Yes. I have kind of a theory about that plays off of something we were talking about last episode.
And we do get a few more data points in that direction throughout this episode as well.
Yeah, maybe we'll discuss it more a little bit later. So yeah, he talks about how, the ritual of the 13th night is going to banish Alora's soul to a realm of perpetual suffering. Or that's what Bavmorda tried to do, and that's what they're going to try to do again. He reveals something I don't think we knew, that everybody's been lied to about what Willow did. The disappearing pig trick is apparently not common knowledge because Graydon here says, in the end, Willow and Roselle teamed up using the Fibonacci hex, if I'm not mistaken, right?
You are not mistaken. Fibonacci, another word from our world, being a
that's actually Graydon's quote, if I'm not mistaken, right? Yeah. And Willow just kind of shrugs it off, like, that's the story I've been told to go with, so that's what I'm going to go with here. I'm not going to deny it.
Maybe
I'm not going to give you a very positive affirmation either, because that would be straight up lying. So I'll just give you a little shrug. Yeah, we're good at what we do.
Interesting to note that in this scene that they are all having a dinner of what looks like a roast pig. Mm-hmm. Before that came up in the text, did you notice what they were eating?
I didn't notice exactly what they were eating.
I saw the pigs immediately and got excited because I knew that there was going to be a cannibalism joke coming.
Yes, and that was probably my biggest laugh of the show so far.
Borman delicately letting the meat fall from his mouth as he realizes, is quite lovely. What I also love in that beat is that I sort of thought Willow was saying that just to screw with them and to make them uncomfortable, but then Willow pushes his plate away, meaning he's just as concerned.
Yeah, it's like, I'm pretty sure we got them all.
Yeah.
We didn't see any pigs remaining on the battlefield in the movie, so I think they were probably okay.
In that beat, he also gives the common story of Bavmorda, which is that she was a sort of promising young sorceress, and that she was abducted and given power by the crone. And I think it's super interesting that the word they used was radicalized by the crone. That struck out with me because it sort of has political contexts these days.
Yeah, I was thinking that too. It's you talk about modernity. It's modernity in a different way, I think. It's definitely something you hear in the news, especially on talk shows on certain networks.
Especially because the way they pose Bavmorda's corruption is that they flattered her and told her she was great. And gave her, and offered her power. And I thought, without going too deep, considering our modern world, that notion of flattering someone until they're willing to accept your message is interesting.
Yeah. Vanity is the root for a lot of evil everywhere, especially, in our world and in the Willow world. So yeah, they start talking about how they need to handle this whole Graydon situation, and the idea comes up that we might just have to kill him.
Yeah, and it's Kit's idea. she's the one who raises it first. And I think everybody else is aware that that's a possibility. But when Kit says it, there's a lot of judgment put on her because they all know she's not the one who's going to do it.
That's right. That's right. And Boorman, I think, delivers the most poignant line of the show so far, where he says, killing someone who isn't trying to kill you back, it's not an easy thing to do. And you can tell he's done it. You can tell he speaks from experience here.
Yeah. It's very interesting how he has become a conscience of the show. I think, in fact, in spite of or because of the fact that he is very morally gray, is that he is still there to sort of nudge back people when they're going in the wrong direction, which he does with Kit later.
Yeah, and of course, they don't want to resort to killing him right away. So Willow says, if there's a right that exists that can extract this kind of evil, I think I'd know where to find it. Do you remember the name of this book that I think we've already seen at the beginning?
I've been writing down every weird word as it comes up, and that book is The Malatrium.
Yes,
and you're right. I went back and checked. The Malatrium is actually the book that we are seeing on the chapter intro of the show. As Willow says, it is bound in the skin of a satyr. Yes,
yes. Although he pronounces it in a way I had not heard, which is apparently the British way. There is a British way to pronounce this word, and satyr is the American way to pronounce it. But sata is the British way to pronounce it, apparently.
Given the dozens of ways that we have so far pronounced cuirass,
yes,
curious, I think I'll not judge anybody's pronunciation.
That's a good policy. I found the name of this book interesting. Like in something like The Evil Dead, you've got the Necronomicon, which I think translates to Book of the Dead, like literally. But if you look at like this in Latin, mal is, if you've got mal in your name, that's
bad.
That's evil. That's literally evil in Latin.
Yeah, it's bad.
And then the rest of the word is atrium, which means, apparently in Latin, means court, as in the court you'd go to, plaintiffs and defendants and that sort of thing, or hallway, or atrium, like a place for birds. So yeah, it's not quite as literal, it would seem. Although I guess in a more figurative way, it's kind of its own sort of court, having these rules and all that sort of stuff.
The word malatrium, just starting with mal, definitely gives the hint that it's a very bad book.
Yes. And so Willow finds it, the Purgation of Narnshub, or Namshub, I guess it is. Namshub. Yes. And of course, that's Berman's favorite purgation, he states. Because we all have our favorites. I was actually looking at the book itself, and there's some very intricate, pictures of, appears to be like a human being, places to slice them, perhaps, or there's all these different kind of runes and stuff all on this picture of a human, and there's all these different words in the Nickonic language, we presume, that are all over the page. And I do wonder if enough care was taken that you could read that in that language if you wanted to. Because in HD, it probably appears big enough to read if you could do that.
Given our experience with Arabesh in Star Wars and how much care was taken to make sure that every single, use of Arabesh actually said something in universe and consistent, I wouldn't be surprised if there wasn't an official Nickonic translation for it.
That's exactly what leads me to that train of thought, is that I know Arabesh, if you ever see it in especially modern Star Wars productions, it is usually almost always something that can be translated. It doesn't always make sense in context, but it usually does.
We try to always make it make sense in context because someone will translate it.
Well, you're talking about LucasArts games that we worked on back in the day, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Do you remember any specific examples? Not to get on too much of a tangent here.
Yes, I remember having to go to an environment artist who was otherwise an extremely talented artist and tell him that he could not put dirty jokes about him and his friends in Arabesh on the inside of the cockpit of a spaceship because someone would read it.
I see.
So I had to ask him politely to take it all out and put in boring text.
Oh, man. Well, for all we know, that same person was working on this and put those dirty jokes into, or dirty references
dirty
into
Nickonic.
This book of evil.
Filthy, filthy Nickonic. Real quick, the purgation of Namshub, I don't know what the intent there is, but Namshub is two things. It's either a reference to Snow Crash, the Neil Stephenson novel, in which it is a language hack, or I believe it's a Sumerian god as well. Yeah.
That sounds very possible, given that there's a lot of kind of Cthulhu-esque stuff going on.
Oh, yes. I've got more on that later as well.
Okay, cool. It also sounds a little Ewokish, I gotta say.
Oh, yeah, it's kind of a...
Yub-nub and Namshub.
Yeah. Namshub. And a Namshub.
So, Willow, of course, Warwick Davis has his roots as Wicket the Ewok. I'm sure everyone listening knows that, but just in case you didn't.
You'd better. One thing that struck me at the end of that exorcism scene is that Borman has a little like, all right, guys, I'm really excited about this exorcism. And insincere excitement usually doesn't work for me because it feels like, come on, man, you're pooping on the thing we're all enjoying. But somehow I don't believe Borman that he's insincere. I feel like he's pretending to be insincere, but he's genuinely excited. Like, I feel like there's such a core of like a big kid who's genuinely having fun that even when he's being sort of snarky, that I like don't entirely believe him, and it's charming. And where another actor, I think it wouldn't work.
I like that take, but I actually kind of saw it as another 80s movies reference, perhaps, but not like verbatim from that movie. I'm going to read this quote and tell me if you know what it is.
I'll pretend.
I love this plan. I'm excited to be part of it. Let's do it.
This is the part where I edited myself correctly answering that question, because I do know it. I just can't recall it right now.
That is Ghostbusters, Bill Murray, after it has been suggested that they cross the streams to defeat Gozer.
Clean break? Yes, of course. That's Ghostbusters.
And yeah, it's totally that same kind of thing. And at the same time, I've talked in past episodes about how I'll see like a funny line from Borman or something in a promotional material. It doesn't work for me. That definitely didn't work for me when I saw this in a tweet. But in full context, it made me laugh. And I wonder if if those promos are doing a disservice to this show in some way.
I think that's sort of similar to my feelings about it, which is that it's when you remove context from snark, it just becomes snark. But in the greater context and who I think Borman is and how I know he feels about the other characters, that's a more complex thing.
Yeah. So, that's actually a little after something we haven't talked about, which is like this kind of montage where Borman needs to go to the armory to fetch the dagger that has an ivory handle and selenium blade.
Selenium blade. Yeah, selenium not being a metal. So I think this is another creative misuse of earthly words.
Yeah, so everyone else is gathering all these materials. Willow expresses that he knows the crone is watching, and that the crone is going to send the Gales to complete the ritual to banish Alora's soul. He says they must do it. He must do all they can to avoid being infected themselves by this vermiscus goo.
Yes.
Don't sniff it. Don't wipe it. Don't eat it.
Yes, the vermiscus goo.
And then Alora, of course, is like, why would we eat it?
Well, what you don't know is that it smells amazing.
And yeah, of course, we want to avoid going to the high tower at all costs, because it's probably a portal to the netherworld, as Willow puts it.
Yes. Another great Warwick Davis sort of understatement.
Let's just not go there. Let's make that rule number one. Don't go to the high tower. So, we know the Gales are coming and we gotta look out for them. So Jade agrees to be the one that goes out on watch. And, on the way out there, she and Kit discuss just how hard it was for her to kill Valentine. He gave me a sword and I killed him with it. I thought that was a pretty poignant line.
And it's very succinct and very it encompasses a lot. I love that Kit approaches that with like, hey, I'm gonna make you feel better. And that Jade is like, you absolutely cannot, because you don't have a context for this.
Right.
Thank you. Goodbye. And I like how much they started off their relationship being affectionate, and that they've had genuine and believable tension throughout the entire time that's keeping them from continuing it.
Yeah, and we haven't really seen much, I guess affection would be the word. We haven't really seen much affection since that kiss. It's kind of been an awkward, even standing apart. A lot of awkwardness. There's a part a little bit later that kind of refers back to all that. We'll get to see.
Yeah.
But before we get there, Borman is out. He's supposed to be helping Jade with the watch, but he's just kind of exploring the castle a bit. He finds a dead guy who has some sort of alcoholic beverage, we can presume.
Which he happily downs.
But very soon he comes across a vault.
Yeah, and then we also start getting this ghostly whispering, which is the first time I realized, oh my gosh, we're in a haunted house. Yes. Because he starts hearing whispers whispering his name and sort of half-heard promises from the other side of the door.
Woman, come to us. That's what they're saying. Very, very seductive female voices on the other side of that. I think it's worth noting, too, just how much the vault stands out. Yeah, it's very like gold and ornate lit, in this very drab dungeon. Well,
what we start to realize later is that there is a certain subjectivity to the physical nature of Nockmaar Castle, and so we realize that that's probably mostly in his head. Another thing that I caught the second viewing here is that when he first gets down in front of the door and tries to pick the locks, he does something with his hand that I didn't catch at first, which is that he sweeps it back and taps the Lux Arcana, and then keeps moving to check his lockpicks, which I thought was really nice once I realized what it is that he is sort of constantly aware of it on his belt, and constantly tapping it to check it, the way that I might tap my pocket to make sure my phone's in it before I walk out the door.
Yeah, absolutely. That's an interesting modern comparison there. It's so modern that will not be in the show. And if they start having iPhones in the context of Willow, I think we can all agree that that's taking it a bit too far.
Listen, at that point, I will patiently await the world building that makes that consistent, but I'll be worried.
Yes. So everyone has pretty much gathered most of the materials, but we learn from Kit that we can't find the nightshade that is necessary.
Yes. Also at this point, we get the first look at Graydon's scars on his chest. Yes. Now, somebody had mentioned that possibly you could see those scars in episode 1 when he's in the tower, looking down. And I guess I've got to go back and check, but I wish that I would have noticed a scar pattern that extensive and ornate. Yes. Possibly it's just sort of peeking up above his robe. But he describes it as he was sick when he was a kid, and that he's not supposed to talk about it because it was shameful, which I thought was a very interesting way of presenting that.
Yeah. He's like, he doesn't know what it was. It was just something bad. And and we'll see later on that there's a lot more to it than the kind of dismissive nature. But yeah, so Elora needs to get this nightshade, which is, a flower, I believe, right? Definitely vegetation of some sort.
A plant.
Elora says that she knows that possums eat it. So in a brined possum bladder, which, it's a castle and weird things are here. Maybe that's here too.
This is our second possum reference as well.
Yes. And third, if you count the movie, obviously. You think maybe this is the ghost of Finn Razel? No. Maybe helping guide them along the way. I just thought of that.
From beyond the grave, giving her liver.
Yeah. I feel like we're going to find out at some point what actually happened to Finn Razel other than she's gone, like we discussed. I
sincerely hope that. One of the things I think the show has been doing, and I've got to give them all credit for it, is they're not doing early exposition when I would have expected a show, more primed for young adult audiences to do early exposition. They're allowing things to develop many episodes later. And
there's a lot of vagueness to the things people say. There's some more examples I'll bring up as we go. But so going back to Graydon and his scars, they throw some water. Is it not water? Something.
It looks like goop, but then it immediately sizzles on his skin.
And it looks like they don't have the nightshade yet, so it's not the complete kind of potion they need. It's just part of the process, and nightshade's at the end. I don't know, but
Graydon has that lovely beat where he gives Elora help with her pronunciation of the magic language. Yes. Again, underlying how much knowledge that he has about sorcery.
It's a hard K sound. Yes. As Kit is exploring kind of the storage area, I guess, the pantry, if you will, of Bab Morda. Yep. she's looking for it. She runs into Borman. Borman tells her about the vault that he's found and can't quite open it. He asks, do you have any eel jelly or nymph butter?
Two very specific things.
Yes.
Which I have some questions about at a later date. Kit does find either eel butter or nymph jelly and hands him a jar of it.
Yes.
But I was curious.
I gotta wonder what nymph butter is specifically. Like, how does one create it? Where does it actually come from?
Nymphs, clearly.
And I also love how Kit is like, are you plundering my dead grandma's castle? And he's like, of course not. Oh, okay. She's like, I don't care if you are. He's like,
he makes a very good point.
100% yes.
As a treasure hunter, like a castle that is deemed cursed and has never been raided must be, the most exciting spoils possible.
Do you know how rare it is to find an abandoned castle that hasn't been sacked? It is his job to sack it and get all of everything it has to offer in that vault, which may or may not exist. Spoilers for later on. I don't know.
Back at the exorcism, Graydon has, I assume, a vision at that point during the process that's super painful to him. And he sees his father. And his father says very specifically, I told you to give Galadorn an heir to Tir Asleen. Redeem yourself for what you have stolen from me. And I got to wonder if that's some variation of what he told him before they left, is that what's critical about this is that you must create an heir. I thought that was also sort of interesting as we talk about gender flipping, but the idea of a royal child who you want only to create a further heir feels like a role that is more traditionally put on women in fantasy and medieval settings. So that's another little interesting flip there as well.
And I think redeem yourself from what you've stolen from me. I think that's specifically referring to the preferred son, the good son.
Oh, yeah. Who we get our first glimpse of a moment later with his long curly locks.
Yeah, he's basically the Boromir to the Faramir that is Graydon. Yeah.
And he says something that appears nice at first. He says, I'll catch you if you fall.
Yes.
And Graydon takes that very negatively.
Yes.
And, and feels like he's being tormented.
Yeah. Actually back in the closet, the pantry area, when Kit and Borman are talking, I think there was a pretty good character moment where Kit is saying, if this ritual doesn't kill him, I'll have to. And Borman says Babmorda would be very proud of her granddaughter now.
Yeah.
Which I think we're supposed to take to mean like he sees Kit as actually wanting him to die.
Yes, or at least being too willing to cast that judgment. Without thinking about the consequences and the reality of it. And that's what I was talking about, where I think about like Borman as the secret moral heart of the show, where he appears the least moral of any of them, but he's always there to catch them before they drop.
He's certainly the one who keeps it real the most.
He absolutely keeps it real.
They haven't used that phrase yet, but it's only a matter of time.
I'll give them one.
So, of course, Kit finds a possum in there, and she's like, really? How okay, it's here. I'll never live this down.
Her growing frustration at Alora's powers and, things actually coming to pass is charming, but also reaches a frustration level where it seems like she's deliberately putting herself at harm for her own ego.
And that brings me to what I'm going to call my Silas Mourner moment of the show.
Oh, no. All right.
Forgive a word I have to use here, but it fits so perfectly. I couldn't not do this. Okay. So what has just happened here is Kit has found a possum. Pompous Princess picked a pickled possum.
For those of you who are on the audio medium of podcast, I just put my head in my hands. And tried not to show that I was laughing.
It's wrong. It's wrong. And I'm going to say it's not me who came up with it. It's like, a prejudiced Daikini in this world.
Yeah.
Who's telling the story.
I understand. You're writing as a character.
Yes. But, it occurred to me this was a pickled possum. And if you think pickled possum, you got to think pickled pepper, which brings up my favorite tongue twister of all time.
Yeah, let's hold off on the racial slur until later, because it does come up again.
It sure does.
It
does.
In an interesting way. But as Kit leaves the possum storage with her possum, she has one of those great, almost a video game moments where she walks down a hallway and then turns around and the geometry has changed behind her. And it's like a tapestry. And she gets this sort of another sort of brief exposition moment about Bavmorda.
Yeah, I'm just going to say the next 10 minutes are, I think, the best part of the show so far.
Once they delve fully into the wild haunted house. Yeah. But I really liked how they did that sort of very simple exposition of her looking at the tapestry. But I also like that she drops the jar and then has to carry the filthy possum by the tail after that.
Yes, that is quite disgusting. But let's go back to that tapestry. There's a lot happening there. It's apparent that she is hearing the voice of the crone.
Yes.
Talking to Bavmorda.
This is the first time we've really sort of established the crone as a character and not a force. Usually she's this sort of distant
not Bavmorda.
shape.
I think that's a question that was open as well.
Not only not Bavmorda, but definitely probably not Raziel or Shalindria, which I was also concerned about, as their exit from the story might put them as that possible. But no,
although
she's somebody...
I will flip that as well. Like, what if none of this is real and just a way that the Lich or the power of the castle or whatever is manipulating the events of the past. So those options, you can never totally rule them out. But I think it's probably the case that the crone is it's her own character. And I think at that point we are also introduced to the concept of the blood of the six, which they describe Bavmorda as being. The crone says to Bavmorda, "Do you renounce your name, your family? Will you embrace the light of the Eternal One? Pledge your life to our endeavor that we might deliver this world from suffering into its warm embrace." So it's been a very constant message where this very evil force has spoken of like saving the world and making it the best, which, And
as we talked about, that's such a much more attractive goal for villainry. I think in the very first episode when they're reading the prophecy written on the Mother's Gate, they refer to the Eternal One as the harbinger of the worm.
Yes.
But we're now starting to get a lot more context and consistency between these terms.
And as the crone says, "You shall be his harbinger, primal priestess of the worm, Queen Bavmorda." And then the tapestry just goes up in flames in a dramatic way. I thought it was... Did you look at the imagery on the tapestry itself?
Yes.
The kind of quote unquote boring thing I'll say is just like Bavmorda bowing before the throne, kind of accepting this new life. But I thought the interesting thing, do you remember what she was writing?
So I'm going to take a wild guess and say I think it was a manticore. Okay,
I could see manticore.
It has sort of a leonine head and sort of bat wings, but I also might be inventing that memory now.
I'm that's not too far off, and it could be that. I'm looking at a image of it right now. It kind of looks like a wolf with wings.
Okay.
And it actually sprung to mind, you said manticore, I thought chimera, which is consistent with Chimerian Cuirass.
Chimerian Cuirass.
But, spelled differently still. That's a thing. So
I do hope that is Chekhov's winged beast and that we're going to see it later.
Yeah, I feel like this winged... I do think it's a wolf's head. It looks like a wolf's head to me, just what I'm looking at. But, manticore could very well be. And, as the Willow world, as we saw in the movie especially... Not as much here in the show, I would say, but definitely in the movie, likes to take things like trolls and dragons and give you a very different interpretation of something you already know.
Yeah. I mean, to a certain extent, they're giving us a different interpretation of zombies and possession right now, which some hooks for that later, I think, is more interesting than I gave it credit for at first.
Yeah. So next we have Borman. He's rejoining... Jade on the watch. I think this is the first time we've actually seen him maybe possibly actually doing some watching like he's supposed to be doing. He mumbles something.
He's walking through.
Yeah, he mumbles something about defeating the door. And then he says, do you think spoiled wine can make you, like, I think we're supposed to infer loopy? I think at this point, you start realizing
they're all clearly
this is a
hallucinating.
Vision. Yes.
Yeah.
And I also wonder, too, if maybe he's seeing more than what we see him seeing with that vault.
Yeah, there's some implications later that we aren't seeing everything that every character sees.
Yeah.
They say some off-screen things that are very funny. But yeah, I think we have to assume that they're all having subjective and individually upsetting experiences in the castle.
Yeah. Of course, they discuss the situation. Jade says one of us is going to have to kill him, and she kind of realizes it's gonna be her.
Yeah.
If it comes to that. But then Borman starts to get like really empathetic and tries to make her feel better. This is an interesting thing that I thought he said. He said, when my partner died, I spent a lot of time running from myself till I realized the only person I'll never get away from is me. And, you know, that works in this context of, you know, making her feel better, I guess. But I think in a grander context, this isn't the first time I've noticed this. He doesn't say Mad Mardigan.
Yes.
He says my partner. And if you'll remember back at the end of the first episode where the Bone Reavers recognized him, I think he's talking about a Bone Reaver. You know?
That would also match up with him saying that he believes Mad Mardigan is alive later.
Yeah.
I think that's that really sort of lovely beat between the two of them, where they are both the warriors of this group, and they have a sort of a special empathy between themselves that Kit tried to extend to Jade, but Jade wasn't interested in getting from Kit and was more accepting from Borman, because they both have that sort of fundamental basis. But I really like that sort of that they are allowed to have that sort of empathy about the after effects of killing and violence. I think that's really nice. Yeah,
and Jade, she says, I just wanted to be a knight. I hate it so far. This is not what I signed up for. And she starts crying. And Borman says, everyone deserves one good cry per quest.
Yeah. In an episode full of great Borman lines, that's pretty high up there.
Yeah. And speaking of high up there, I did think it was interesting that they are in the position of General Kale and his men when
you're right.
When Willow and Rizal are there. Kind of like Willow was hanging out on Bavmorda's throne earlier. And I gotta, is there like some kind of symbolism there, or is it just like they're in the castle and this is the place it makes sense to be?
There's more intentional role reversal imagery than I caught at first, so I always want to assume intent when I noticed something. Okay,
so now we go back to Graydon and his situation. They've completed the potion because they have the nightshade.
But I just want to point out how, they could have just come into the room and say, we have the nightshade, but no, they made a prop of a filthy, disgusting pickled liver, and they gave us a shot of that liver sizzling in a frying pan, and I am grateful for that.
It would have been incomplete without it.
No, it was gross and I loved it.
So yeah, they do the potion, they apply it to Graydon, and they chant the incantation.
The incantation also holds two, or maybe 1.5 direct references to Lovecraft and Cthulhu mythos.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. One of the things they chant is Yug Shagog, which is very close to Yog Sothoth, or the word Shuggoth. Both of which appear in Lovecraft writings. Then they also end the chant with El Katuth, which sounded more like Cthulhu until I saw it spelled out. So I'm going to give that a half a reference. But Yog Sothoth and Yug Shagog, I think, are probably close enough to call that a direct reference.
Interesting. Yeah. I've been cheating on our own podcast and listening to other podcasts about Willow, which there aren't a lot.
How dare you?
But I want to give a shout out to What the Force, which is normally a Star Wars podcast.
Hello, folks.
It's two Canadian ladies who I find it fascinating because, one, they offer a very kind of feminine perspective on things that you don't get from two dudes here. But they also really delve into the mythology stuff and the Cthulhu of it and all that. They're probably saying the same thing you are on their latest episode. But yeah, like, I just, I know we want to destroy our competition and all, but before we do that, you should see what they're all about. Well, you don't want to?
No.
I thought that was just assumed.
No.
Oh, okay.
I was going to do
like a chant of obliteration or whatever it's called.
We definitely have to have a meeting after this. I'm not sure I'm okay putting hexes on other podcasts.
Oh, it's all fun and games till someone gets their soul banished to another dimension. No, seriously, What the Force is excellent. There's also a good one that I forget what it's called, but it's got the better SEO than us. So if you search Willow Podcast on Apple Podcasts, it's ahead of us.
We'll put a link to What the Force in the show notes. And then the other one, they've got better SEO than us, so you can find them, no problem.
Yeah, not a problem at all. So they do this chant and incantation, and they apply the potion to Graydon. And do you remember what he says?
Yes, he immediately grabs Willow and says, "Give me some water, Peck, or you die." Now, is that, I had to listen to it a couple times, are they actually using the voice recordings of Mad Mardigan saying that?
I don't know, but there is actually a little more to that. It was, get me some water, Peck, or you die. Understand, water, hurry up, which is exactly verbatim.
Yes.
What the very first words that Mad Mardigan says to Willow.
And it didn't quite sound like Tony Revolori's voice. So I was wondering, and we do some interesting stuff with voices later that we'll chat about, but that was the first time I thought maybe that they had used lines directly from the original movie.
Perhaps. I think that's very possible. That's a question for David Collins, if we ever get him on here. And, but I think the really interesting thing here, Willow doesn't hesitate. He gets that water. And you can see that he's like totally freaked out when you see that on his face, because he obviously remembers this moment. And you got to think,
catches him wrong-footed.
It's like, this is Mad Mardigan's exact quote. Like, how would they know that?
Yeah. Which
leads me to wonder, like, maybe has Mad Mardigan encountered the Lich in the years past, and has the Lich invaded his mind?
Oh, yeah.
Maybe something we don't know. Has the Lich done something to Willow in the past and gone into his mind?
Just after that, he talks as Eric, and Willow says, "Don't trust him. It's the Lich." So, yeah, you have to believe that the Lich would have to have knowledge of Mad Mardigan's memories, or Willow's memories, or Migosh's memories.
Okay.
if they were to know about that moment, yeah.
I mean, maybe he terrorized Migosh, or Bertlecut was there too. Bertlecut.
Oh yeah.
Vonkar. Yeah. All those guys were there to.
But definitely,
to see
we have to assume that the Lich's knowledge includes part of Willow's life.
Yeah, and now we're forced to wonder how. At the very extreme end of this, and maybe I should say this for the end, but I'm just going to say it now. What if Mad Mardigan is the Lich? He's been converted by the crone in some way.
I think it's probably not unreasonable to think that he's at least been kidnapped or subsumed in some way.
Yeah. I think that's taking things a bit too far, but I think it is not impossible. Also, it would be very sad.
And then the voice changes again and becomes Mim's voice.
Let's go back to Eric. We didn't even talk about much about Eric. So Willow said it's trying to break our concentration. It's still not really clear. I mean, I think it probably was the Lich, but as we'll see later in the show, the situation described is actually accurate to Eric.
We'll talk about that. I didn't make that connection until this point.
He said he's alone in a cell, and he's all alone.
And that it's warm.
Okay.
We'll get back to that. But yeah, this is where I think it's really interesting about the possession, is that they don't let you know how much the Lich is in control versus how much the person is in control. Because with Ballantyne, clearly Ballantyne wasn't speaking as the Lich. He was speaking as Ballantyne believing the Lich. So there's still an element of that person still there. Like, when we see people fully possessed, they're still acting as themselves, thinking they're in their own best interests, which happen to be the Lich's interests.
Oh, that's interesting. That makes me think, does the Lich have anything to do with Queen Bavmorda? maybe he took her over in some way and got her thinking.
I do feel like at the end of this episode, we get the clear hint that the Gales are going to come screaming back into the story. So I feel like we're going to get a lot more of these questions answered very shortly.
Yeah, I'm just, as we discussed, I'm thinking new questions to ask that probably are wrong. But you never know. If they're right, we could say, hey, we called it. Even though there's a big question mark after every single one. So yeah, you're talking about Willow's daughter.
Yeah. So the possessed Graydon starts speaking as Mim, as Willow's daughter, and he says, if you don't tell her what happened, I will. And it's not the first time we've really underlined the idea that something bad has happened to the Nelwyn village in the past, and that Willow is in some way if not responsible, didn't save them in some way. And his response there pretty much clearly shows that that's the case. When it breaks Alora's concentration and she says, wait, what does that mean? He basically tells her to get the hell out.
Yeah. I think it's obvious in this situation that the words are supposed to refer to the kind of the story of what happened with Willow. Yeah. But I wonder too if there's a different meaning. You know how it ends. You can't change it. You can't protect her. Tell the truth or I will. Is there a different truth that we don't know yet? Oh,
you know what? That also might be referring to the knowledge that Willow has of the vision where Alora always has to die to save the world. So that also might be that. Yeah, I'm retroactively saying that's what it's about, and that's why he did not want to speak to her about that in that moment.
Right. And of course, Alora's like, what happened to your village?
Yeah.
And Will is like, yeah, get out of here. So now we're back at Borman.
Yes. Who has all over his hands what I can only assume is eel jelly or nymph butter. Because his hands are entirely coated in what looks like a clear, slippery goo. I don't know how that was supposed to help him pick the lock, because he's coated his hands in this goo and he's like desperately trying to pick the lock. But I'm delighted that was the end goal of eel butter.
I would assume he's coated his lockpicks in this material as well. I don't know. That's whenever they make a Willow RPG like that, I'll get into the nuts and bolts of
the stats of eel butter.
Eel butter. Wait,
excuse me.
Eel jelly.
Nymph butter.
Eel jelly. Nymph butter. Yeah. Very important differential there. Fiddlesticks, he says, because he can't make it work. I love that word. And the voice talks to him and says, you can make this right. She took the Lux, and he does not have the Lux Arcana.
And he does that same hand back and pat his side action that he does before, which is so practiced. So it's cool how much the castle knows their weakest spots right away.
Yeah. So we go back to Alora leaving, and she sees Kit in the hallway. They have a little conversation.
And I'm really glad they returned to the beat about the woodcutters and really underlined what I thought that beat was about, which is that Alora has this responsibility that follows her, whether she likes it or not, that can be extremely dangerous and disruptive if she's not cautious about it. So I think it was nice that they returned and underlined that.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I think, again, there might be a little more to it, because she went out of her way, it seemed, to say they were eating lunch. That was a very specific action that was happening. I'm going to, again, say thank you to What the Force for calling this out. In mythology and fairy tales, a lot of times bad things happen to the protagonist through the antagonist inviting them to eat something.
Oh, interesting.
So Elora, I don't know if we actually see her eat something in that, but we're presumed to think that she had lunch with these characters, and that maybe from that, there was actually more to the scene at an antagonistic level, maybe even a protagonistic level of someone trying to help her. But that it struck me that they didn't have to say eating lunch. She could have told that whole story without the specificity of eating lunch.
That is interesting. I'm glad. I'll be glad if those characters come back even sort of within the story as an idea, not necessarily as the characters, because I like them so much.
Yeah. So Alora really doubts herself. I can't save anybody. She hears a woman screaming that Kit does not hear. She goes out into the hallway, and then Kit can't find her anymore.
Yeah, Kit says, "I'm not going to lose you a third time," and then promptly loses her. The castle at this point, we're amping up what the castle's powers are in its ability to separate people or confuse them or lie to them. We get the biggest hint of the castle's powers next when we see Jade starting to have a vision first of her dead mother, and then of a monstrous figure looming out of the darkness to attack her. And Chris, how did you feel about that?
I thought it was cool to see General Kale again. He's got the coolest appearance of any character in the Willow mythos I think I've discussed in the past. And he used the same language he uses in the movie. He says, "Now you die, no mercy." Fights in a similar manner. I don't think it's identical, but...
So I have some cool bits of information about this, courtesy of our friend, Mr. David Collins.
Oh, wow.
I thought at this point that they had reused Pat Roach's original VO from the original movie. But I learned just an hour ago, do you know who did the voice for General Kale?
No.
That would be friend of the show, Sam Witwer.
Really?
Yes.
Nice.
Sam, whether you like it or not, you were a friend of the show.
I met him once. He was nice to me. Yeah. If you don't know, Sam Witwer, the way we know him is through the game The Force Unleashed, where he played Starkiller. And of course, he's done a lot of other things in both in games. He was in Days Gone recently. He was the main lead in that. And just acting. He was in Battlestar Galactica at the time. He was in Smallville. I think he was Doomsday in Smallville. And, he's done a lot of things since then that aren't immediately coming to my memory, but he's an awesome dude who loves Star Wars and Lucasfilm and stuff. Because
he and David Collins are good buddies. David tweeted about how he studied
tell
Pat
the people
Roach's
who
voice.
David Collins is. They may not know who David Collins is.
David Collins, I'm not entirely certain what his official role. He's the sound designer and mixer at Skywalker Sound, but he did a lot of the sound design for the show.
Yes.
And I think a lot of the voiceover as well. He can specifically tell me what he did and how what I just said was wrong when he comes on the show.
Which you have to do now, David.
Yeah, you are obligated, sir. But yeah, I thought that was original VO from the movie, but no, they had created brand new VO for that.
Cool. I will add a little tidbit here as well. Way back, like a year and a half ago, maybe, when they had what might have been the first actual trailer for the show. I guess the guy who in that suit was all excited and was searching for his name. I think I said something about like, how does General Kale fit into this? And he was like, "Oh, dude, I was General Kale and I was so excited to be in there." And I was like, "Wow, okay." No, I don't think I mentioned Kale. I think he must have just been looking for compliments on the trailer or something, because that's where it dawned on me that how is Kale in this?
Yeah.
And I've noticed since the tweet has been deleted, so he might have gotten yelled at or something for divulging that spoiler. But I don't think we'll see Kale again unless it's a flashback.
No,
it's pretty clear he's dead.
Yeah.
But yeah, I thought that was really cool. And the fighting style was pretty close. I don't remember him like scraping the walls and stuff in the movie.
No, but it's a lovely image. I also noticed that they brought back one of the original musical themes associated with General Kale.
Definitely hears his theme. That's a character I feel like they ever want to do like Willow comics or something. They could really expound upon that guy. I feel like there's a lot more to him than meets. He's the Boba Fett almost of this.
In that he looks cool and has
the
3
way
lines.
We felt about Boba Fett before we knew so much about Boba Fett. Yeah, he has very few lines. They're all kind of badass lines. And he's got this appearance that, I don't know, I find incredibly menacing and appealing.
He's your boy. I get it.
Yeah, so Jade just basically blocks the door and prevents this image from this vision from haunting her anymore, which is very real to her, very real.
At that point, we also see what Allura is up to as she's following the woman's cries. And I believe I mentioned earlier about how much I dislike VO reminding me of what happened previously. I lied. I liked it here because when we get the VO of the sort of past of Allura's mother in there, I truly had not made the connection. Oh crap, Allura was born right here.
Yeah.
Like this has a place she's connected to. So that was the time where that I genuinely appreciated the VO reminding me of a flashback.
More than VO, it's like full on imagery
enters it
from the film. And there's more dialogue from the mother about...
I've got another David Collins tidbit here.
Okay, great.
They actually brought back in Sally Ann Law, who played Allura's mother in the original, and she matched her on-set performance from 34 years ago to record the new lines.
Oh, was the actual physical... She was physically there?
The actual actor. No, I don't know if she was physically there. They recorded the VO for her new lines matching the original performance.
Okay. Yeah, my assumption, which may be true, I guess, is that they used some additional footage that, may have been cut to and just kind of made the mouth work with the new lines. The new lines, by the way, are, she's here, I see her, I feel her, she's grown up, fierce and resilient. She is a beacon of light in a time of dread, which I can actually see her saying at that time. Too.
I always love the trope of cross-temporality in visions, where somebody who shouldn't be able to affect the past has some sort of effect on the past. I think that's a lovely little loop.
And I also have to wonder, going back to all the 80s movie references, if there was a little bit of Back to the Future 2 that inspired this.
How so?
Back to the Future 2, like Marty sees his past self enacting the events from the first movie. And, it's kind of like that, but not in a fun way, in a more emotional way. Because this is, I believe, the emotional peak of the show. And it wouldn't surprise me if it is for the entire show. Because, just think about the weight of that. Like, seeing your mom you've never seen before, and then she dies. That's your only image of your mother. It's
especially poignant when you think about the fact that she was sort of deliberately made to forget all of her past. So this isn't just, remembering. This is, remembering for the first time. Yeah, it's just very impactful. And my favorite moment of the show so far, single-handedly. And then when we go back to Jade, Kit has somehow made her way into the locked room, which Jade tells us she spent 30 minutes barricading, which, again, the castle at this point is just totally divorced from reality, which is really lovely. Yeah. And Kit has this throwaway line where she's like, the spiral staircase just tried to eat me. There's a whole scene there that I didn't need, but is just, I know what happened. It was a very lovely, economical way of doing that. But yeah, so then there's a knock on the door. Jade thinks it's Kale, probably still, somehow. Oh, by the way, we didn't say this outright, but I think we're supposed to infer that General Kale killed her mother, or he was there. Oh, I wonder. I don't. Does the timeline match for that? We don't know how old she is. Yeah, we don't know exactly how old she is. If she's like 23, maybe. I'm going to have to do a complex Willow World timeline just to make sure I know where all of these things align. As soon as I mathematically figure out what a moon is. Right. Well, they've told us outside of the show it's 20 years. Okay. All right. Which, but how long is a year on this planet, too? I guess exactly. There's that little asterisk. Everything's out the window. But I think it's within the fiction of the story. I think it's reasonable that Kale would be involved in the slaughtering of refugees. Yeah, not a good guy. Yeah, I do think that's what it was trying to tell us. Because it's a memory of hers, and they could have used just random Nockmaar soldiers, or not even. I mean, if it were after Kale, then it wouldn't be Nockmaar soldiers. It would be Bone Reavers. But didn't she die at the Mother's Gate? Okay, so maybe it wasn't Kale. I'm going back. The barricade had to. All right, so maybe they just wanted to bring Kale on. All that stuff I just said is wrong. Because it was cool. It might have been Bone Reavers, and as we said before, Kale himself may have been a Bone Reaver. So maybe it used the imagery of Kale mainly for us, but to her it was just a big bad Bone Reaver, and I don't know. Anyway, let's take a real quick word from our sponsors, and we'll be right back.
Willow Talk is brought to you by Dove's Birthmark Concealer. Because you don't have time for a lengthy quest right now. There's muffins to make.
We're back, and we're still talking about Boorman and Kit and Jade and their situation. So Boorman's on the other side of the wall, and Kit and Jade are really doubtful because of all the stuff happening. And what happens next, Cameron?
Well, they first pretend that they are multiple people, that they're all heavily armed. Kit also lowers her voice to say who is it, and she does it so low that I didn't recognize it as her voice. I had to back it up 2 times because I thought it was another character. It's almost frightening how deep this voice is coming out of her. But yeah, once they realize that it's Boorman and that he's not swayed by their fake threats of poisoned flails, they ask for a reason that they could trust that it's the real Boorman. And his response is, okay, you two totally have the hots for each other. And I think given the way they look at each other and then bounce back and away from each other, I think that more than anything in any other episode clarifies where their relationship is right now.
Yeah, and they both deny it too. They say, no, we don't. Yeah, not at all.
They're backing away from admitting it. Yeah.
Yeah, and then Boorman gets in there. Remember, he believes right now that Kit has the Lux Arcana, so he attacks her.
Yes, and Jade immediately comes to her defense. And Boorman has to back down a little bit. And I think there's something that I really liked about this because I had previously was concerned that Boorman had hidden the Lux Arcana. I am always uncomfortable when characters are holding back information with other characters because of that tension. And especially if you look at this as an RPG party, as a game master, I'm always uncomfortable when players are holding information back from each other. So I was nervous that Boorman had this secret. And I think him feeling like it was stolen and then making the accusation actually serves as a really great way of putting it out in the open, that we no longer have hidden information. We're back to sharing all that stuff. Yeah,
definitely. So, eventually they come to terms after some drawn swords and Boorman realizing, you got to wonder that what he was thinking because he knew Jade was there. And
I think at this point, between the spoiled skeleton wine and the castle, he's probably not thinking clearly.
Yeah.
And before that resolves, though, Alora finds her way back to the exorcism chamber, where she finds Willow missing and Graydon buttoning up his shirt and taking off his binders.
Little suspicious there. Little sus, as the kids would say.
Immediately suspicious the way he says, I'm fine, but Willow's possessed. We got to go chase him. And then I felt bad for being suspicious because it's so clearly Graydon after that. He talks to her about like, I don't want you to go up in the tower. It's dangerous. He actually is using a sort of reverse psychology to get her to come with her.
He's using the idea that people go along with things if they think it's their idea.
Yeah. And so at this point, I'm very curious how much of this is the Lich and how much of this is Graydon and how much of this is Graydon thinking he's doing the Lich's business. I mean, does the Lich just let him operate until it needs to take over, knowing that he will protect Alora? Or, so it's not just a sort of the Lich is in Graydon's body. There is some manner of interplay between the two.
Yeah, I wonder if, we'll see later on that his face starts looking really lichy. And, but it doesn't right here. So maybe, when we saw Valentine, he was slowly being taken over, but, it really started to take over whenever he would do lichy things.
Yeah.
And he would degrade and go further with that. So I do wonder if, if free will is maybe associated with the Lich being in direct control.
Possibly. And, that change between the makeup is so sudden that I assumed that maybe that there was some sort of glamour hiding it. Like, they were hiding what had happened to him. But yeah, without really meaning to, Alora goes exactly against Willow's wishes and follows Graydon into the high tower. And then the torch of them going up into the high tower somehow can be seen across the rainy courtyard through a window by Boorman, enough to interrupt that previous scene where he tells Kit and Jade to look behind them. I'm going to let that slide because I don't know how he possibly saw that from so far away, but it's enough to draw them.
Good eyes.
Yeah. treasure hunter eyes. It's enough to draw them all up after him.
A bright light would stick out, maybe through the rain. I don't know. I've never been in a in a cursed castle trying to see a light across the way, so I can't. It's true.
We're all just making assumptions.
So they get to the tower, and in a very Bavmorda move, Graydon basically uses the Force to close the doors.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe he did use the Force, if you want to go with our stupid Star Wars theory.
It's a fact.
So Elora tries to reason with him once it's very apparent that the Lich has taken over. She says, I know you're in there, Gray. Have we heard him refer to as Gray yet?
No, I think that was the first time she used that shorthand. And his response is, yes, of course I'm in here. This is me. I am now strong and confident. Isn't that what you wanted? Which is the point where I was like, oh, this is just Graydon thinking that he's doing the right thing. Like, this isn't the Lich speaking for him at all. This is Graydon expressing what he would want and how he thinks he's going to get it in this manner.
But then she says, that's not why I love him, when he's talking about strength and confidence.
Yeah. And
we don't get anything more than that. And it begs the question, why do you love him? Why do you love Eric?
Yeah. And especially with the intimacy that they're building between Graydon and Elora, sort of obviously at this point, and how much Eric and Elora are separated. I'm curious to see how they play out that triangle.
Yeah, I mean, I gotta think the reason she loves him is that she doesn't really love him. She's infatuated, and she's young and experiencing her first dose of love / infatuation.
Yeah.
And I think she's kind of coming to terms with that as this quest is pursuing. So eventually Willow makes his way from wherever he was. I don't think we ever really found that out.
No, he was conveniently off screen until he needed to pop on at the exact moment. And as I've said before, I have no problem with Deus Ex Machina. Bring it on.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about it till now, really. Like, I would like to have known where he was. Like, apparently, you would think Graydon's or the Lich somehow incapacitated him in some way. And I guess we can still assume that. And he just came back. I'm
happy to hand wave past it, but it is a little unusual.
Yeah.
And then the Lich, once Willow comes in, it becomes clear that where Graydon didn't know the truth about the Fibonacci hex, that the Lich absolutely knows the truth about the Fibonacci hex.
Right. We should mention, too, that Willow just completely scolds Elora for going up to doing the one thing, the absolute worst thing she could have done. You are the worst apprentice ever.
The worst apprentice. Yes. Yeah. And he's been unkind to her in the past, but this one was a big goof.
Yeah.
You should have known better.
So Graydon continues the ritual, or the Lich as Graydon.
Oh, and I have one more David Collins tidbit here. Mm. They actually did pull Gene Marsh's original incantation dialogue from the original to underlay with Tony's VO.
Oh, cool. Yeah, I think I heard that. I heard that as I was listening to the show. So good job in making those meld together, David. So as you were starting to say, the Lich reveals exactly how Bavmorda was defeated, and we see it all in a vision. And again, it's directly from the movie. It's exactly how it happened.
And this is where they do this really nice thing of matching the exact camera angles so that they can have, and they're on a recreation of the same set as well, so they can have this really interesting overlap of the original footage and the new footage, that it doesn't feel like it doesn't have that sense of like Forrest Gump characters being edited into footage.
Right.
It feels like a really interesting overlap of two things because they've matched the framing and the lighting so well.
Yeah, it's a wonderful recreation of the set. I wonder if they had any of that old set that they actually repurposed. I wouldn't call it emotional, but just very amused when they had like that shot of the spiky gate. Because the spiky gate, if you think about it, is ridiculous. When would you ever really use a spiky gate? Like when it happens,
the purpose
in the movie,
of a spiky gate is to pick somebody up in the air.
So excited she could finally pick somebody up and throw somebody at the spiky gate. Is it there just to prevent the prevention of rituals?
No, it is there just to comically pick people up and push them against.
I want a spiky gate for my house. So the Lich asks, how will you defeat us? nice triumphant moment. We see old school Sorsha and Finn Rizal there in a vision. Same as last time with my friends. So my question is, like, how did that vision come? Because the Lich isn't going to put those two ladies there.
Every other vision sort of works consistently for me. And it feels like I understand where it's coming from. I feel like what the intent is. With that particular vision, I feel like the intent was to have that emotional beat for me, the audience, which I did. And I was like, hooray. But then I immediately thought, hold on a minute. Why did that happen?
Yeah, and, so maybe Willow put them there. Consistent. Maybe Willow has enough power. We're talking a lot about how, and I think we actually kind of missed a spot or two in this episode where he's kind of dismissing. There's a part earlier where he's like, Elora, I need your help for this. And for all we know, Elora's doing all the work. So Willow does use some magic here.
Yeah.
It puts Graydon on the floor.
It also puts Willow on the floor. Puts Willow
on the floor as well. And then we see Boorman come and somewhat comically try to punch the Lich out of him.
Yeah. The staging in this last beat felt a little awkward to me.
Do you think that was a reference to when Bavmorda and Finn Rizal were punching each other? I don't know. I just thought of that. Like, is there a parallel
now
there
I
trying
think it is.
to reach there? Yeah.
Multiple people have been punched in the face multiple times in that same set.
And then Willow is just like held in place by some creature thing on the wall.
What is so? I mean, I understand that it's a reference to the original movie where like a bird bath is accidentally animated by magic and it fights Willow, but it doesn't appear to be any other living things.
If you look at it closely.
Oh boy. There doesn't appear to be anything else in this room. He just leans against something and then all of a sudden like a goofy sort of gargoyle face and two arms hold him back. I mean, it's basically he just needs to be restrained for the plot.
Yeah.
But it makes it's a very unusual choice.
Okay, so bear with me here. It's not explicitly stated, and maybe they're relying on fanboys like us to parse this out, but there is a lot of just like fighting with the wand between Finn Rizal and Bavmorda, and that's what creates the bird bath creature.
The bird bath.
But there are also like shots that from the wand that just like hit the wall. So maybe that thing was created in that moment and just didn't. It's stationary there. It can't do anything. It's been sitting there for 20 years. Like
been waiting for its chance.
I want to hold it out.
All it wanted was a hug.
And I've been meaning to talk about this since the first episode. Actually, I want to know what happened to bird bath / kettle / thing with skulls, because Willow just pushes it out the window.
Oh, that's right.
Did it die? Is it a living thing?
I got a better idea. It stayed and it created a family. And what we saw was the descendants of the bird bath.
There you go.
The whole castle is populated by sentient objects.
We figured it out.
This is my headcanon. It is correct.
There's nothing to dispute that at all. So after that, we get Elora looking at herself in a vision right there, having the ritual performed upon her. Interesting thing. Calling back to something, my crazy theory from last episode, that in some way Elora and Kit maybe had souls switched or something. Kit sees the baby. Kit sees the baby, or at least it's very much implied that she sees the baby too. And it's the only vision, I think, in the entire episode that two people both see.
Interesting.
So
I'm going to have to go back for a consistency check to see who sees it. But you're right. That is unusual. I was mostly frustrated at Kit in that moment for having held off on the "your seat charm worked" thing that she wanted to tell, because it was so important that Elora know that she did have some of the power that she thought she might.
Yeah, but it's also part of just her stubborn character to hold it back for that long. So, I mean, I think this episode is just full of all sorts of character development.
Yeah. I also think that it takes a lot of character beats that I was sort of frustrated that they were stringing out, like hiding the Lux, or, not being honest with Elora about what you know. And it ended those. It resolved them so we can move forward. So I'm really thrilled about that.
Yeah, and Kit just totally rallies Elora here. The telling her about the Eckleberry bush was a major thing. It was beautiful. And Elora expresses doubt. She says, "I don't know how." And Kit just says, "Yes, you do."
Yeah. Follow your gut.
And I gotta say, I don't understand Willow's reaction here. He says,
100%.
Don't you dare.
I wrote that down. Why the heck why does he not want her to try? And I think maybe it's the sense that he's become so formal about the study of magic and about, following his orders, and his orders are the only right way. But it does feel this is again, sort of my problem with the overall plotting of what's going on in this sequence, is it feels like I don't fully understand why he would want to stop her. I really like the notion of, hey, stop trying to follow the book and trust your intuition, because I think that goes back to the sort of core of Willow magic, which is which finger has the power to control the world. I like that a lot. So I was very, very, it was strange that he was so against it. And then when it works later, he's like, never doubted you for a second. So I'm curious about that.
I wonder if they'll come back to that in some way. Like, why did you doubt me in that moment?
Yeah.
Or if maybe it's a key moment for Willow where maybe even he was having some doubts up to this point. Yeah. And because of those doubts, that's why he was afraid something worse might result. Like maybe she would become possessed. Maybe that's what it was.
Yeah. Maybe now he is more understanding that her power exists outside of his ability to comprehend, that it's not the exact same sort of magical powers that he has on the same channels.
Yeah. So Allura kind of hovers over Graydon and sucks the evil out of him.
Yeah, it's a very sort of, there's nothing sort of arcane or planned magic about it. It's sort of a natural thing.
Yeah, and with that comes a vision.
Uh-huh. Yes. We very clearly see the moment at which one of the two brothers dies. And we see how much, supportive and loving his older brother was, who seems to be the more physical and capable brother.
And of course, he was referenced in the first episode, almost like just a throwaway. Yeah, he fell out of a tree and died.
Yes.
And here we get the moment where that happened.
And what it appears like is some change comes over Graydon's eyes, and he grabs his brother and throws him out of the tree.
Yes.
And so, I mean, I have to assume that's the experience that he's had with this in the past, that there was some sort of possession that caused him to kill his own brother.
And this is where I'm going to revise my, what I was expressing last time. I think I said last time that Galadorn was basically jealous of Tyrosleen and knew that with the Empress coming back to Tyrosleen, they were inherently inferior. There still might be some of that, but I think the real thing happening here is that the Lich took over Graydon as a kid, and then the Crone or forces of the Crone came to the king and said, we'll free him of this curse, but you owe us one.
Yeah, there's been some sort of long tail manipulation.
Yes.
Absolutely going on, yeah. And King Hastur may think that he is only just securing Galadornian, supremacy in the future, but there's definitely a long game of manipulation and cons.
Yeah, so shortly after this tree throwing incident, maybe that's when, in a Maleficent and Sleeping Beauty kind of way, the Crone shows up and says, hey, this is the deal, and I'm going to free him, but you owe me one. And that's when he gets the scars and all that. And his knowledge, that was a very traumatic event. So it stands to reason that he has been studying, not only going from what he remembers of this possession in the past, but he's been studying this dark magic to, prevent it from happening as badly, which he kind of did. He was very cooperative in this being chained up and everything.
I really like how they have slowly expanded on his character, where everybody else is much more upfront about who they are and what they want.
Oh, by the way, the brother is his real life brother. The actors.
Oh, I just thought it was the same actor.
No, he looks a lot like him and sounds a lot like him, but it actually is. I think his name is Mario Revloni.
Oh my gosh, that's uncanny.
Yeah.
And so with that all accomplished and the sun rises, and sort of we have that sort of the exit from Nockmaar, where they are all sort of buoyed by what has happened. They're all feeling better about it. We get that shot of Borman doing the exact same tap with his belt to realize that the Lux Arcana was never stolen.
Actually, going back to the sun rising, I found it interesting. First of all, this is the first time I think we've ever seen Nockmaar Castle in the sunshine. And in that light, it's actually kind of oddly beautiful, I would say, as a castle. It's not the symbol of dread that it always has been.
And it's shot in all those really warm sunrise tones. And I think, coming right off of the sort of emotional peak that we've had, I think that's entirely fitting and intentional.
Yeah, it's like they've defeated the darkness of the castle, and now it's in the light.
And Borman knows he has the Lux. It's out in the open. We all have to talk about it now. We get the nice little shot of General Kale's helmet in the dust. What I thought was really lovely about this is that as positive as this beat is, we get this great two-shot of Graydon looking at Allura very sympathetically, very gratefully. And then we get this shot of her being like, okay.
Yeah.
Because she now has this burden of information about him that just is, it's a stone in between them now. I think that's...
Yeah, even though Willow is like, you may make a great sorceress yet, she's just like, she can't even take that in right now.
Yeah, where everybody else has this very positive moment, she has this poison little bit that she has to digest.
Yeah. There's also a bit to digest here of some more about the blood of the Six.
Yeah, we get our last little bit of lore.
Willow tells us, in the beginning, in the Grove, which, as you'll recall, was where the Fae who created the Chimera Curious is from.
That would
6
be
Faes. There must just be a lot of Faes in the Grove, I guess. 6 Faes betrayed the mothers to serve the dark power. I don't recall, but I'm guessing the creator of the Curious was a mother.
I'm not sure.
Mother,
We've heard the word
M.
mother a couple times in the Mother's Gate.
Yeah, that's just occurred to me that there's a connection there between Mother's Gate and the mothers in the Grove. That it's a capital M word, as you see in the captions. That line continued through the ages. Strong magic, but corrupt. The blood of the Six. So, yes, it's not a Willow episode without him dumping some sort of very long statement that you really got to keep up with and process to get it all. In the beginning, in the Grove, 6 Faes betrayed the mothers to serve the dark power. That line continued through the ages. Strong magic, but corrupt. The blood of the Six.
I will say that Warwick Davis is doing a great job delivering a lot of this sort of complex and flowing lore stuff.
I feel like he was like, let me just say all this exposition and lore and in the longest, most awkward way possible at times. I don't care. I just want to say it.
And we get a very unsettling shot of one of the faces of the Gales, which we haven't seen since the first episode. I didn't realize they've been sort of a present idea, but I'm excited to see them again. And again, it was really nice to be reminded of how gross their face makeup is. I really like how they've leaned into disgusting.
Yes, yes.
One last thing, as they're walking away, I didn't catch this till the second time I watched this, but did you notice that something has physically changed about Allura in the moment since she drew the spirit out of Graydon?
No.
She has a lock of red hair.
Really?
In the middle of her blonde hair now, yes. She has a fairly large chunk of reddish hair in the midst of her blonde.
So it's like Rogue at the end of X-Men kind of thing.
Yeah. It's her red hair. Her Allura Dannon red hair is slowly coming back.
That's
cool. Or maybe like Elsa in Frozen.
Okay.
Did I just forget one of the characters in Frozen? My kids must have grown up.
Yeah, and then, we get our nice indie rock version of Black Hole Sun by Soundgarden as... Yeah,
so I think last time I said I would be okay with any covers as long as the lyrics didn't start during the show. And I'm going to go back on this. This cover worked for me so well. And I have been thinking about this for a while. I think it's the fact that I have such strong familiarity with the song and such an absolute lack of an emotional connection to it. It doesn't bother me.
Okay, I
Black
see.
Hole Sun. I have no bones in this.
Whereas you're not a big fan of Enter Sandman, but you know it, or maybe you don't
exactly.
know it.
Or I am a huge fan of Hurdy Gurdy Man, and if you poke the wrong chord there, I'll be upset. No, this is, and it was so different from the original version of Black Hole Sun. It's this very, mournful and quiet piano ballad. I will say that this probably was my favorite minute of the entire show.
Oh, wow.
Between the music and the imagery, I think Well, what we see is we see Eric waking up in a cell there's ashes drifting everywhere in the air, which I'm making that connection to it being hot as well. But he walks out through this extremely alien environment, one that's unlike any of the other things we've seen before. And it's this sort of, these huge statues that are hundreds and hundreds of feet tall, but it's an almost apocalyptic setting. It's this ruined city, and not ruined by a war or by a sack. It's just sort of collapsed in this Ozymandias in the desert sort of fashion.
Nice comparison.
And it's sort of this cosmic horror and sort of alien horror aspect to this huge, unusual alien city that I'm like, I need to find out immediately what this is. I want to know more about this aspect of the world building immediately.
There's also something, despite all this destruction, something bright and optimistic, I think, about it too. Like it didn't seem like a hopeless place to be.
It's austerely beautiful. It reminds me a lot of the sort of huge backdrops in sort of the concept art for that Giger did for the Alien movies, but with less of that sort of biomechanical thing. It has that same sort of huge and striking thing. If you've played Returnal, it reminds me a lot of the settings of Returnal on the PS5. These sort of alien, inhospitable, giant environment.
Cool. In that game you die a lot, so maybe Eric dies a lot, comes back, and I don't know. I'm just trying to trust.
It's definitely like it was the most. It's my favorite 30 seconds of visual imagery in the show so far.
I do think the line from that song, "In disguises no one knows," like, is there? I feel like these song choices are somewhat deliberate. It's not a one-to-one thing. I mean, that song anyway is weird and indecipherable.
Yeah,
really.
Absolutely. In fact, there was a tweet from, I think, Jonathan Kasdan, who talked about at the end of the last episode, whether or not you liked Enter Sandman showing up, it was always their intent. And from the very first draft of the script, it reads, a song starts, it's familiar, but we don't recognize this version of it. And then there's a point at which you are supposed to recognize the cover. So there absolutely was an intent to choose, cover versions of famous songs that were both
Exit Light, Enter Night is perfect for that situation, right?
Thematically, they're totally correct. I have my own problems with popular music in art, but I think the Black Hole Sun cover was the time so far where I was like, "Yep, I get it. This works completely well."
Yeah. All right, have we reached our rating time yet?
I think we have, yeah.
All right.
I always forget who goes first. I think I went first last time, didn't I?
I'm going to let you go first again.
I'll do it again. Okay. I think this episode for me is a really solid good. I think I had a couple little, bugaboos about plotting, about the sort of the staging of certain things at certain points. I think if you are just asking me to judge it on that last shot is often good. But I think it's a solid good for me.
All right. Well, I will take the so often good route here. This is my favorite episode by far.
All right.
So far. And I was totally in the whole time. I dug there's just something about a dark dungeon that appeals to me. And I think it put a good taste in my mouth all the way back in 88 when I saw the movie,
and they had such a focus on, like, we are going to do a dungeon haunted house this episode. Like, it has a very nice clarity. And
the callbacks and the moment with Alora, me seeing her mother, just like, that hit me. That was like that. Whereas like in the first episode, I talked about how I got like fanboy chills when Eric said he was great about his dad. That was a cool moment, but like this has actually had like an emotional story beat, and it had the nostalgia attached to it. Just that whole kind of 10 minutes of like what's going on here in this haunted castle was great. The humor, I think, worked for me even better in this episode overall than the other ones, despite this dark, oppressive environment where they are basically the entire time. I was just super impressed at the sets, and it seems like maybe this, I don't know if they poured the most money into this, but it seemed they definitely were trying to recreate one of the most iconic parts of the movie, and maybe the most iconic location. It totally worked for me.
I think I've mentioned before that I have a cold, black, dead heart when it comes to nostalgia. But I mean, just the joke about possibly eating the pigs alone.
Yes.
That's fan service for me, and I appreciated it.
Yeah, and that's my favorite joke in the show so far too. I think there's a very good chance this will wind up being my favorite episode. But I hope I'm wrong. You know, if I'm wrong, then the show has some really great stuff ahead of it in my eyes.
We mentioned a little bit earlier about the notion of consistency and modernity in Willow. And I mentioned that, this is the first time that I feel like a modern language joke has sort of crossed over my threshold for what I feel like is appropriate and isn't appropriate. And I know that you've been talking about how a lot of people on the internet are upset about that level of modernity.
Yeah, it seems like the go-to criticism, even more so than, I don't like the plot and I don't like the characters themselves and stuff like that, is they put denim in there and yeah. They said it sucks. Yeah. And there's modern language. It's anachronistic is a word I hear a lot.
Yeah. Yeah, we talked about how anachronistic is a very silly thing to say because it assumes a connection to earthly time.
Yes.
When which we are watching a fantasy show. And, I feel like if an iPhone appeared in the next episode, I would be upset. I wouldn't feel like that had a place in it. Denim doesn't do that for me.
Yeah.
And I think part of it is, and I want to be sort of sympathetic to this argument that I'm not entirely sympathetic to, is I think what most people are looking for in fantasy is not historical accuracy. What they're looking for is consistency. And they're looking for a world that feels consistent because a consistently built world feels true and it feels like one you want to go back to. And the more a fantasy world is inconsistent and contradictory, the less emotional connection we have to it. So I feel like there's a really misguided sense of wanting to protect the sanctity of something here, that fantasy can't have denim in it. And I think I just want to extol people to let go of that. That fantasy means you can truly do whatever you want. What matters is consistency. And I don't think there's anything inconsistent about Willow so far, with the exception of Borman knowing who Beyonce is.
Sure. And the two things I'll say about the denim. One, if they have denim in this world and they have denim in this world, who cares? Two, maybe they don't have denim in this world, and maybe that scene was meant to stand out along with the sunny way it was shot amidst all the other kind of drab, foggy locations and such. And maybe you were supposed to notice that it's different. And even if you didn't notice it was denim specifically, you just noticed there's something off about how these people are dressed. And maybe that's going to pay off later. People are so quick to judge. And, I do kind of think it's going to come up again too.
I think my third defense of denim would be that it looks good as hell. Everybody who's worn denim in this show has looked awesome.
Okay. Here's a way that I would put it. Like, people are like, well, we haven't seen denim in any other Willow material. First of all, up to that point, there was 4 hours of Willow material. I know that hard hats exist. I haven't seen a hard hat in the real world here, since I saw somebody doing construction on the street maybe a couple weeks ago. It doesn't mean it's not out there. Maybe the denim is a very woodcutter specific attire. And nobody else
denim
wears
is
it.
just it's a woven cloth. Like I can find many reasons to assume why a woven cloth would exist.
They're fine with cotton, but they're not fine with
if you think
denim.
about the original movie's costumes, Sorsha is wearing a Mongolian hat and a Mongolian bow. Eric's wearing like a Roman hat and then also like a spray painted fake leather chainmail. Like we accept that this is a simulacrum
because they're not earthly anachronisms, I guess. I don't know.
Right. We aren't actually
I think that's what it comes down to.
A fantasy world. We are seeing Earth people make a fantasy world for us. And at a certain point, you have to carry a little bit of water.
I did do a little bit of subredditing. There is a Willow subreddit that apparently you can't post to anymore because the mods deserted it or something. But before that happened, someone was talking about how things were anachronistic. I said, How can anything in this world of fantasy be anachronistic? The rules or the world or whatever the writers want them to be in this fantasy world as denim and cowboy hats. To which someone, I won't say their name, but
Yeah.
I never liked this argument. Sure, you could have a robot suddenly fly down in his spaceship because it's fantasy after all, but then the setting becomes kind of dumb because why are they riding horse when the world has spaceships? If they can make jean jackets, why does only one person in the world have one? I just addressed that. Why is nobody else wearing clothes that require a sewing machine to make when clearly they must exist? Does denim? I don't know. I don't know enough about denim if that's true or not.
Yeah.
If they can
My
make
textile
rivets,
knowledge is lacking.
if they can make rivets, why are they not building structures out of steel? I would say because rivets are like really tiny.
Yeah. It's a very different
you use
thing.
steel to make a sword. Anyway, my response was, come on now. This is a Lucasfilm production. It'd be a droid, not a robot. And it's suddenly flying down would simply be a revelation that this was a planet in the unknown regions the whole time. All magic is the Force is secretly Star Wars Episode 10.
So you joke, but that's exactly what I'm saying. It's what you are saying is that consistency would make those crazy things work. It's inconsistency or a lack of care to the consistency that makes them stand out. And I don't feel that anything in this has been inconsistent, except for Greyonce so far.
Yeah, there's other people that are just like, it's lazy to say it's a fantasy world. And no, it's not. It's different. It's just different than what you have in your head. Okay,
All I will say to that is open your mind to the possibilities. It can be anything you want it to be, and then you can just say why. And then
so
it gets
the other
to be
part
that way.
of this whole modernity thing is the language used, which, can be fairly modern at times. But attached to that by the people criticizing it are often them saying, well, the first movie didn't have that. And it totally did.
Yeah,
it wasn't as apparent as like this sucks or kick his ass or something like that. But it was, this stinks. This whole thing stinks.
I will posit to those people that possibly what didn't bother them as an 8-year-old may be bothering them now, because this is not something that was made specifically with them in mind.
Right. I mean, just off the top of my head, other things like, Willow, you idiot. In a something Tolkien-esque, you say, fool of a took.
Yeah, exactly.
You don't say, you idiot.
There are levels of modernity and speech,
Yeah, there's a couple times
taking a pee-pee.
There's a couple times where the word absolutely is not like a true adverb. It's more of yes, which I think is an adverb too technically, but that is a modern take on that.
Yeah. We're going to talk ourselves out of not liking the original movie at this point. But no, you're absolutely right. It was consistent in the original movie, even when it was weird. Chris, may I give you this week's lore update?
Hit me.
Okay, I'm going to do something slightly different this time. I'm going to list every new concept that came up in this episode, and I'm going to include one that did not, that I made up.
All right. It's a game.
At the end of this, I would like you to tell me which one of these things did not appear in this episode of Willow. Vermithrax, Vestal Fair, Ritual of the 13th Night, the Fibonacci Hex, the Order of the Worm, Malatrium, Purgation of Nam Shub, Selenium Blade, Vermiscus Goo, Eel Jelly, Nymph Butter, Quarian Salve, Blood of the Six, Primal Priestess of the Worm, The Grove, and The Mothers.
I'm going to pause a moment to let our listeners posit their own guess. What was the salve? The salve one, I think, is the answer.
Quarian Salve?
Quarian Salve.
Yes, you're right. I made that up. I apologize. I will never do that again.
It's a fun game, though. I'm in the position here where I, too, am writing these things down as we watch because I'm doing a podcast. So yeah, I did recognize those items, but I think
I'm gonna
if
have to
I
get more
were
devious
not
in the
taking
future.
notes for a podcast, I may have missed. I may not have gotten that.
Chris, do you have any predictions for the future at this point?
Do I have predictions? I think I have expressed some things. You know what? I don't think I do beyond what we've discussed, because I had a revision to a couple things that I expressed last time. I talked about how Mad Mardigan might be connected to the Lich in some way. or Willow may be connected to the Lich in some way, based on that scene that is verbatim from the show, which also gave me fanboy chills. By the way, I didn't really say that, but it was. I know, like I was watching it with my wife at the time, and she's not as familiar with the movie, and she didn't recognize anything out of that, and I totally did, and so I think there's something a little bit more for the fans. But yeah, nothing that isn't like a pure revision of stuff I've already been saying.
I think I have some sort of guesses where some plot threads and arcs are going, but not interesting enough to put onto a podcast. I think I would be happy if the next episode entirely focused on Eric and wherever he is. I'm so fascinated by the imagery of that location that that's all I can think about right now.
Yeah, I don't know why this just popped into my head. Did you watch the X-Men cartoon when it was new back in the day?
I will say yes instead of instantly humming the theme song. Yes. Okay.
I think it might have been season 1, but I think it was season 2 where was it Xavier and Magneto? They were in the Savage Land. And it was like at the end of every episode, you'd catch up with them in the Savage Land. I think that's what Eric is going to be. I don't think that we're going to get like a whole episode of him there. I think we're going to get like a little check-in at the end of the episodes leading to 7 or 8. I think around 7 we might see him for real, and then 8 for sure, obviously.
A cosmic horror fan can dream, but yeah, I think you're probably right.
All right. So yeah, I think that's about everything here. Actually, and if you haven't already turned it off, dear listener, we do have a Patreon now. It's not live as I speak, but I think it will be by the time you hear this. Just look up Willow Talk on Patreon and it should come up and you can read it all for yourself.
And I would like to say thank you for all of you who have reviewed the podcast on iTunes, on Apple Podcasts. That number went up again, and I'm very, very grateful. Like I said before, I have heard that's how people find podcasts, and that's how podcasts get reach. So if you wouldn't mind popping over, review, rate, and subscribe, that would be great. And again, anything you write in a review, we are forced to read on the air.
Well, just throw some stars at us. We're cool. A Willow podcast on most social networks, Twitter, Instagram, even though I never use it, and YouTube even. We have this on YouTube. You may be watching it there. A Willow podcast. And Cameron, where can we find you specifically?
If you wanted to find me online, you could. I don't know why you would, but I'm on Twitter. You can find me in the show notes or connected to the Willow Podcast Twitter feed as well.
And I am at cbake76 on pretty much everything, mostly Twitter. That's kind of what I use, whether I like it or not. And I also have a YouTube channel about superhero video games that I'll just promote for a second. It's called superhero.vg. Very soon, possibly by the time you're listening to this, I will have released a video about my 40 favorite Marvel video games of all time, because this is the 40th anniversary of Marvel video games right about now. And Spider-Man for Atari 2600 came out. Wow, that was all one breath. Anyway, thank you all for listening. Anything else you have to say there, Cameron?
Yeah. Hey, Warwick. Warwick, if you're out there, buddy, can you give me a call back? I'm really sorry. Just anytime. I may have burned a bridge here, guys. I'm sorry.
Anyway, I think I'm supposed to say, what's the line? Ignore the bird, follow the river, or go wherever the right direction is.
Ignore the bird, follow the river.
Yeah, I don't know anything about Willow.
Unless the bird's going the right way, in which case follow the bird.
That's it. That's what I just said.
That's it. Yeah. All right. Bye, y'all.